Some places carry their history not in photographs or records, but in the weight of their silence. This mansion was one of those places. Perched at the edge of a forgotten coastline, it had once been someone's greatest vision, a home built not just for living, but for a kind of living that most people only dream about. Grand in scale. Deliberate in detail. Designed to hold the ocean inside its walls without ever letting the world in. But visions, without people to sustain them, eventually fade. Years passed. Then more years. The salt air that had once made this place feel alive began its slow, patient work of reclaiming what had been built. Paint lifted from walls like skin peeling from sunburn. Floors that had once been polished to a mirror finish grew dull, then cracked, then began to surrender to the pressure of time pressing down on them from every direction. Windows clouded. Ceilings sagged. The grand rooms that had once been filled with light and laughter and the sound of the ocean through open doors became chambers of stillness, holding nothing but shadow and the memory of something better. This is what abandonment really looks like. Not dramatic collapse. Not the sudden violence of destruction. Just a long, slow exhaling. A house breathing out its last warmth. A beautiful thing quietly becoming a ruin. And yet, it did not disappear. It stayed. Through every season, through every storm that came in off the water, through every year that the rest of the world forgot it existed, the mansion remained standing at the edge of that cliff. As if it was waiting. As if it understood, in whatever way that structures understand things, that its story was not finished. It was right. Every transformation begins with a decision. Not a plan, not a budget, not a team of people with tools and materials, a decision. A single moment when someone looks at something the world has written off and chooses to see it differently. Chooses to see not what it is, but what it could become. That decision is the most important thing that happens in any restoration. Everything else is just the work that follows. The work that followed here was immense. 8 rooms. A staircase that had once been the architectural heart of the home. A pool that had dried and cracked and filled with the debris of years. A structure that needed to be understood before it could be reimagined, its original intentions honored, its damage confronted honestly, its potential mapped out with care and patience before a single surface was touched. The design direction emerged from the location itself. This was always going to be a coastal home. The ocean was not a backdrop here, it was a collaborator. Every material chosen, every color selected, every surface finished had to answer to the water and the light and the particular quality of air that exists only at the edge of land and sea. The palette came first. Soft whites. The pale blue of shallow water on a clear morning. Sandy neutrals that hold warmth without weight. Natural wood tones that speak of driftwood and weathered docks and things shaped by the sea over long periods of time. Stone surfaces that feel cool underfoot and carry in their texture the memory of beaches and riverbeds and the ancient slow patience of the earth. These were not decorative choices. They were a philosophy. A home at the edge of the ocean should not feel designed. It should feel inevitable. As though the space grew there naturally, as though the walls and floors and ceilings simply organized themselves around the light that comes in off the water each morning and the darkness that settles over the coast each night. The goal was not luxury for its own sake. The goal was harmony. A space so aligned with its environment that the boundary between inside and outside becomes something you have to think about to find. The floors came first, because floors always come first. They are the foundation of every atmosphere, the surface that carries every other decision, the element that either unifies a space or quietly undermines it. The original floors had been beyond saving, decades of damage had seen to that. But the concrete beneath them, the raw structural layer that had been there since the beginning, that was something to work with. Something honest. Something that, stripped back to its essential nature, had a kind of quiet dignity that no amount of neglect had been able to fully erase. Deep pore epoxy was chosen not as a trend but as a solution. A material that could take the raw honesty of that concrete foundation and transform it into something that belonged here, something that carried the colors and the light of the coast in its surface. The process was slow and deliberate. Preparation took longer than the pour itself, because surfaces that have been damaged need more care than surfaces that are simply new. Every crack sealed. Every inconsistency addressed. The foundation made honest before anything was added to it. And then the epoxy moved across the floor like water finding its level, carrying in it a palette that could only have come from this place. Pale seafoam. the translucent blue of shallow water over white sand. A surface that, once cured, would hold light the way the ocean holds it, not reflecting it back sharply but absorbing it, softening it, giving it back to the room in a way that feels like the light is coming from everywhere and nowhere at once. Room by room, this quality of light began to define the home. The entry hall was the first room to reveal itself fully. It had been the first thing visitors encountered when this mansion was alive, and so it carried in its proportions and its architecture a kind of intentionality that the more private rooms did not. High ceilings. A sight line that drew the eye forward and upward simultaneously. A staircase rising from its center that had once been the most beautiful thing in the building and had since become simply the most visible evidence of what time had taken. The restoration of that entry hall was about recovering presence. Lightening what had grown heavy. Opening what had closed in on itself. The walls were brought back to a soft, warm white that amplified every photon that entered through the windows. The sight lines were cleared. The architectural details that had been obscured by years of damage and accumulated material were exposed again, revealed in their original precision, the curves, the proportions, the relationships between elements that had been designed with great care by someone who understood that a first impression is something a building only ever makes once. And the floor beneath all of it, the seafoam epoxy catching the morning light coming in from the coast, turned the simple act of entering this home into something that made people stop. The staircase itself deserved its own chapter. Because a staircase in a home like this is never simply a way of moving between floors. It is a statement of intention. It is the place where the architecture announces itself most clearly, where the designer's thinking is most fully expressed, where visitors understand for the first time what kind of home they have entered. This one had been designed with that understanding. Its curves were sculptural. Its proportions were generous. Its relationship to the entry hall it rose through was one of dialogue rather than imposition. It belonged to the space in the way that something made specifically for a place always belongs to it, in a way that nothing brought in from elsewhere ever quite achieves. Restoring it meant understanding it first. Then removing everything that did not belong to it. Then bringing back what did, with patience, with precision, with the kind of attention that a thing of genuine quality demands. When it was finished, the staircase rose through the center of the home like something that had always been there and always would be. Which, in the most important sense, it had and it would. The living spaces unfolded from the entry hall with a logic that felt natural because it had been designed to feel natural. The main living area was the largest room in the house and the one that most fully expressed the coastal direction of the whole. Its proportions were generous enough to hold furniture and space simultaneously, to create areas of intimacy within a room that could have felt overwhelming in its scale. The approach was to let the room breathe. To resist the temptation to fill it. To understand that in a space this close to the ocean, restraint is the most sophisticated choice available. Curved forms softened the architecture wherever straight lines had made the room feel harder than it needed to. Warm wood surfaces brought organic warmth into a palette that might otherwise have felt cool. Stone elements carried texture into spaces that needed it, the particular kind of visual complexity that only natural materials can provide, the kind that holds the eye not because it demands attention but because it rewards it. And the floor carried the ocean beneath everything, its pale epoxy surface connecting the room to the coast outside in a way that no view through a window alone could have achieved. The kitchen was designed around the idea of calm. Not the sterile calm of a purely functional space, but the calm of a place that has been thought about carefully, where everything has been put where it belongs and nothing has been put anywhere else. Stone-inspired surfaces that cool to the touch. Joinery in the warm whites and soft neutrals of the coastal palette. Fixtures chosen for their quiet quality rather than their visibility. A floor that continued the language of the rest of the house, the same epoxy, the same light, the same connection to the water outside, so that moving between rooms felt like moving through a single continuous thought rather than from one space to another. The bedrooms were conceived as places of genuine rest. This sounds obvious, but it is rarer than it should be. A bedroom that truly rests you is one that asks nothing of you when you enter it, that makes no demands, presents no distractions, offers only the uncomplicated pleasure of a space that has been made exactly right. The coastal palette reached its quietest expression in these rooms. Ocean blues so soft they were almost white. Sandy neutrals that held the warmth of afternoon light even after the sun had moved on. Textures that spoke of natural things, linen, stone, wood, without announcing themselves. Floors that carried the same pale seafoam of the rest of the house, but in these rooms felt less like a design choice and more like a natural extension of the world outside. Waking up in a room like this, with the quality of coastal light that comes through windows that have been positioned to receive it, is an experience that reorganizes something in you. It reminds you what mornings are for. The pool had been the last element of the original mansion to give up. Outdoor structures resist abandonment differently than indoor ones, they are built to weather things that interior spaces are not. But eventually the years had their way here too. The water had long since drained away. The surfaces had cracked under the pressure of seasons. The landscaping that had once framed the pool and connected it to the house had grown beyond its original intentions and then beyond caring about those intentions at all. Reclaiming it meant more than repair. It meant reconceiving the relationship between the pool and the house, making them part of the same idea rather than adjacent but separate things. The coastal design language moved outside without interruption. The same palette. The same material honesty. The same preference for harmony over statement. Stone and wood and the pale neutrals of the coast extended from the interior into the outdoor space until the distinction between them became something you had to consciously locate rather than something you simply felt. And the water, when it returned, clear and still and catching the sky above the cliff, completed something. Not just the pool, and not just the house, but the relationship between this place and the landscape it had always been part of. The ocean was still out there, beyond the cliff edge, exactly where it had always been. But now the home that stood between the land and the sea felt like it belonged to both. That is the thing about great restoration. It does not simply return something to what it was. It recovers the original intention, the vision that existed before the damage, before the neglect, before the abandonment, and it brings that vision forward into the present. Not as a replica of the past but as a living continuation of it. A statement that the best things are worth preserving. That beauty, properly cared for, does not diminish, it deepens. This mansion stood at the edge of a cliff for decades, waiting. 8 rooms. A staircase. A pool. A coastline that never stopped being there. A home that was always worth coming back to. It just needed someone to come back.